In this video, we're going to take a look at how we can use anchor points to drive this custom spray material, as well as a technique for using folders to manage your brush strokes. So first thing that we're going to do, I'm going to jump over here to my assets. I'm searching for spray, and I have this spray paint material. So I can left click, drag and drop, and just place this here onto my object. When I drag and drop like this, it defaults to surface mode, and I can now drag this around here onto the actual surface. However, for this technique, I need to have this in UV projection. So if I do this method, if I right click, you can see here that the projection mode is set to warp projection, but it needs to be UV, so we need to make sure that we're in UV projection. Another way that we can work with this, here, let me just undo this, is we can come over here to our assets, and I could just take this material and drag and drop it right here to the layer stack. And then when I drop it into the layer stack, right click, UV projection is set. Now, this particular material, if I scroll down here towards the bottom, it takes an image input. So it's looking for me to supply some type of image input so that it can create this spray paint effect. But what we want to do is, instead of an image, we want to be able to supply into this effect, paint strokes or a path, a curve, something like that. So what we're going to do is use anchor points so that we can anchor our brush stroke and supply it here to that image input. Now, there's a couple ways that we can work through this. So first thing, I need brush strokes, right? So I could create like a paintable layer. So we have a paintable layer. I can come in and I can, start painting here, right? And so, this could be one way. However, I don't really like working with paint layers like this because I feel like they're pretty destructive. So I'm going to show you a technique that I use to help manage multiple brush strokes in a pretty optimized way here in the layer stack. So here's what I do. I'm going to come over and I'm going to create a folder. So not even a layer, not a fill layer, but a folder. All right. And this folder, I'm going to call this strokes. So I'm going to think of this as like, a folder, a collection of my strokes. And one of the, features that was added to Substance Painter, it's not super new, but, it's within the last, I think, maybe a year or two ago, you're able to apply effects to a folder. And this is going to be pretty awesome for what we want to do here. So what I can do is, with this selected, I can come over here to add effect, and I'm going to add a paint effect. So now with this paint effect, and here, let me just grab a default brush. So we'll come over here. I've got this paint spray. Let's go into my brushes. Just grab a default brush here. This one's fine. And then I can paint, and you can see that this paint here is now, part of the folder, okay? So the folder's not a material, it's not a layer. I mean, it's in the layer stack, but what really matters here is this paint effect. And the paint effect, it has its own blending mode, its own layer opacity, and if I right click, it's gonna have its brush settings, but again, every paint effect has a material associated with it. So I have color here, and that's why I'm painting color. Okay, so this could just be, a way to, kind of organize paint strokes in a way here in your layer stack, just by having like a strokes folder. And you can add as many of these paint effects as you want. You can just keep stacking them. You can use your blending modes. You can, rename these guys, all that kind of stuff. Pretty cool. So now that that's in place, what I need to do is create an anchor point. So the way the processing of the layer stack works, it always processes here from the bottom up. So what we have going on here is we have a paint effect. Okay, so that's this stroke that you see here. And then we're using an anchor, which, think of an anchor as like a pin. We're just pinning a space or a spot here in the layer stack, and we're collecting whatever was below it. So in our case here, we're collecting this paint stroke. And then we can recall or reference this pin somewhere else in the layer stack. And the only rule is it's got to be above it. So you can see here, I want to use this custom spray paint. It's below my strokes folder. I just need to drag and drop it up here above, and now it's going to work. Okay, so we have our anchor. Here's what we do. We select the custom spray paint. We're going to right click, scroll all the way down here towards the bottom. You have your image inputs. We're going to click this custom image. We're not going to grab a resource, not an image. We're going to go to our anchor point now. And then here you see I have my strokes. We're going to select this. And that is producing here the effect. However, it looks pretty weird because not only are we seeing the effect, but we're also seeing, because of this paint stroke, has color information. And it looks offset and weird, and it's totally not what we want. So a way that I work around this, I'm going to delete this paint stroke here. I'm going to come over here to my texture set settings, and I'm going to create, here, let me expand this guy over here so you can see it. It's not going to work. Let's see. Never mind. It's going to get cut off when I click this plus button, but I'll explain what's going on. So if we look at our drop down here, we scroll down, you'll see we have user channels, and then a little fly window pops out and it says like it says user 0 all the way to 15. And so I'm going to select user 0, okay? And you can see that it shows up here. Now I can double click and I can rename this. So just, for naming convention's sake, we're going to call this strokes. You can name it whatever you want. We're going to leave the color space as is. It's totally fine. All right, so let's jump over here to our layer stack. Now, we got our strokes. Let's add a paint effect once again. Now, here's the thing. Remember the processing order. Anchor needs to be at the top, so just make sure that the anchor's at the top. If this doesn't work, or you see something like this, just first things first, go and check and make sure that your anchor is in the right spot. I can't tell you how many times I've had it like this, and I'm painting. I'm like, it doesn't work. What's going on? And then I'm like, it's always something like this. Oh shoot, the anchor needs to be at the top. All right, so let's go to paint now. Now to get this to work, we're gonna right click. We're not gonna use color. We're just gonna keep this at stroke. You can see this is our custom strokes channel. And we have this value, it goes from 0 to 1. We're just going to keep it at 1. Okay, so now everything is set up. However, one more check. You got to come over to the custom material, and you got to come down to where you have the anchor point, and then there's a reference channel. This is another area where it's super easy to miss. I do this all the time where it's set to the channel that I'm not trying to reference, and then it doesn't work, and I'm like, what's going on? So just make sure that you have this set to your strokes. Now everything should be working. So if we come over here to our paint, we've got our brush, and I'll start to paint here. Now you can see that I'm painting with this, custom channel here, like you see this little squiggly line. And then if I go to my custom spray paint, now I can go to the options. Let's go to our material here, and let's add a custom material and just give it a little bit of an off-white. Now we can really start playing with this thing. We don't want metallic. We can go to our paint. We can expand. We can play with some deformation, some variation intensity, border. Maybe that's too much. That looks pretty cool. Pull this down. Definitely want to have leaks enabled, so that always looks really cool. We get some leaks here. We can play with the width. I love having these border drops, so I'm going to enable these guys, increase the spread, the drop size, so on and so forth. So now this looks like our little effect, right? And then we can jump over here to paint, and then I can paint, and now I can really start to work with this here. Now, what's interesting about this effect is we can, like I said, stack this information. We can name this. So, you can turn this effect on and off. You can even come over and play with the opacity. However, for this to work, this opacity, remember your channel indicator here, you need to switch this to strokes so that we can lower the opacities. And when I do that, you can see what this is kind of doing to the actual stroke. Pretty neat. All right, so we'll leave that back at 100. Now, I'm going to come in and add just, another paint effect here. And of course, I could come in and I can just paint like another stroke. So now this folder is starting to house the different strokes that I have. So I can turn these guys on and off. You can rename them. And like I said, you can also, play around with the opacity setting. Just, again, make sure that you have the strokes channel indicator so that you're actually changing the blending mode for the strokes and not, something else. All right, so we'll bring this back. Okay, let's delete these guys. It's not going to break anything because the anchor point's what's driving everything. So now we'll jump in and we'll grab paint, make sure it's below. This time I'm going to jump over here to my curve path. And now I'll come in here and just click and just start to, just create a curve. And this is pretty awesome because now I can play around with this curve, and the curve is even more non-destructive than the brush because I can change things like, say, the size. I can even select, let's see, let's grab like a little point here. Let's grab this one. So I just select it, right? You can left click drag, select the point. Let's go over to pressure and lower the pressure down. And then look at this. You can get these cool little fall off points like this. This is kind of neat. Move this one around. We'll leave this one as like a little anchor point. We'll go up here to the top, pull the pressure down, and then you can get some neat stuff like this. We could even select this little point. I think we can increase the size. Nope, it's doing it globally. But you can use the pressure setting here to kind of vary the stroke and get some neat kind of little fall off like this. Again, we'll click this one. Let's go back to this. I'm just left click to selecting the little points. We'll play with pressure, and then we get something like that. Looks pretty cool. And that's the overall effect and how we can work with this here with the pen tool or the paint along path tool alongside adding multiple strokes. So here we can say this one here is my curve. If you hit the Q key, that's going to, it's not going to show the curve. And then, of course, we could jump into our spray paint. And then here's where we can start playing around with, all of our settings and things like that, dialing the effect up and down. Something else that's pretty cool about this is, so we've got our curve, right? And here over in the path tool, because we're using the path tool, it has its own like little miniature layer stack. And again, you can name these, right? So let's say this one's W. Now, I'll hit Q to bring back the curve. If I hit the Enter key, let's see, make sure we're on the curve. I'm going to come in and hit enter. Okay, so that basically like deselects my curve. Now, with the curve deselected, I can then come in and, let me go back and here, make sure that that's deselected. Let's paint a curve here. Now, I can go in and have, two curves. So I've got the W curve that I can turn on and off. I've got this other path on top of it that's completely editable here. Look at this. I love how it's like, just depending on like how the curve moves around, the paint effect is doing different things. Pretty neat. So it's like you've got like this multiple dimensional layer system here. You've got like the curve tool with 2 layers. Then that is all embedded into this little curve, right? So this it's housed in this. So this little paint effect, which is my curve, is how it it contains 2 other paths. Then we can come into here and add another paint on top of this one, and we'll grab a brush. So let's come over to our brushes. Let's do spray. We'll use paint spray. Grab this one. Move our brush stroke down. And then now we can look, paint this on top. And we're just getting all kinds of like really cool variation to what we're doing here. And because we're using anchors, we can reference this information, anywhere else in the layer stack. So now we're using the folder as like a way to house all of the strokes. So here I've just renamed that one brush. And like I said, with the anchor, we could use this anywhere in the layer stack, as we're doing here with this custom spray material. And so that's how you can use anchor points to drive this custom spray paint material, as well as use folder to house different strokes. Thanks a lot for watching, and I'll see you next time.